Season 1 start. New scene. 2B walks among the ruins, her mind heavy with recent revelations. The truth of humanity's extinction, the lies woven into her mission, and the looming question of her own purpose had become a crushing weight. Once unwavering in her resolve, she now felt a strange emptiness, a hollow sensation she couldn't explain. Seeking escape from her spiraling thoughts, she wandered aimlessly until her steps led her to a place untouched by time. An underground facility hidden beneath layers of rubble. The large metal doors stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for her. She stepped through cautiously, as Pod swept the area for threats. The air inside was cold and still unnaturally so. It felt wrong somehow. A faint glow flickered in the distance, drawing her eye as she moved deeper into the structure, past rows of abandoned consoles, their cracked screens and corroded panels reminders of how long this place had been left to rot. A sense of unease prickled at her. She crept toward the light, casting a glance at Pod 042. Pod, run a scan. Something isn't right about this place. Pod 042 casts a grid-line light across the chamber, unveiling a capsule still functioning slumped against the far wall of the adjacent room, half lost in the faint glow that filled it. As Pod 042 completes its scan, a message pops up on 2B's visor. Scan complete. Room secured. No machine life forms detected. One additional vital signature found. Race unknown, but has the integrity of a machine. Similar in composition to YorHa units but also different. Age unknown. Status dormant. Curiosity tickled 2B's system as she takes careful steps towards the capsule, trying to clean the dust and dirt that smudged the glass. She came to investigate this facility, thought she may have found humans, but she found something else. Once 2B manages to clean the dirty glass, looking inside she could see something. It looked like a human, but also did not. It looked like an android, but also did not. It was a person or a machine. Whoever it was, it looked male, clad in crimson armor, vest, and helmet. Long flowing blonde hair cascades down its shoulders. He looks sleeping, suspended in animation as she lays there. The capsule beeps and wheezes, signaling that even as this facility state, it's still operational, and whoever is inside may be alive or active, but in a dormant state, suspended from who knows how long. On a screen the words state. Designation, Rockman 0. Serial, DW in Infinity. Status, Hibernation. Date when sealed, Standard Calendar 23XX. Systems, online and functioning. Warning, do not disturb until Maverick virus has been purged. Viral status, no Maverick virus detected. She stood there for a moment, her gloved hand resting against the cool glass of the capsule. The designation Rockman 0 meant nothing to her databanks. The date 23XX was so ancient it felt abstract. But the fact that this entity was considered both machine and not, that its systems were online, dormant yet functional, it stirred something within her. Her eyes narrowed behind the blindfold as she processed. She had come here hoping for answers about humanity, only to find yet another relic, something that defied easy categorization. Part of her wanted to leave it sealed, the warning was clear. But another part, the part that had seen machines evolve beyond their programming, wondered, what if this was something different? Another kind of survivor. Pod, she said, her voice low and steady. Analyze the warning. Maverick virus, any records in YorHa archives. Querying archives, no data found on Maverick virus. Warning indicates potential hostile reprogramming or corruption. Advising caution. Caution noted. Her fingers traced the edge of the capsule's control panel, dust flaking away. But if he's been here for millennia dormant and the virus is purged, she paused, weighing the risk. We can't leave him here. If he's sentient, he deserves to know the world he's in. She found the manual release, a heavy lever, stiff with age. With a grunt of effort, she pulled it. Hydraulics hissed, steam venting from the seams as the capsule door began to slide open. Steam begins to fog out as the release mechanism was activated. With a whiz noise, the hatch opens and slides away, giving access to the content inside. On the screen, reports begins to unleash. Capsule unsealing in process. Reactivation of subject. 0. Commencing. Status for full reanimation. Time -5. Processing. The android person, this entity, lay still on the inside of the capsule. On closer inspection, the physic looked young, like a late teens or early young adult, and its height was short, 5 feet and 3 inches, shorter than 2B in stature. Pod 042 hovers before the capsule. Assessment. Maverick virus sounds similar to the logic virus produced by machine life forms. The steam cleared slowly, revealing the figure inside more clearly. He was smaller than she'd anticipated, compact, almost slight, with youthful features that seemed at odds with the ancient armor encasing him, 5'3" shorter than her even without her heels. His crimson armor was sleek, sharp-edged, but showed no signs of decay. It was as if time hadn't touched him at all. Her eyes lingered on his face, peaceful, eerily so. He reminded her of the YorHa scanners in a way, youthful male-presenting units designed for agility and intelligence. But this was different. This wasn't a YorHa design. This was something older, from a war she had no record of. Pod's observation about the Maverick virus drew a faint nod from her. If it's anything like the logic virus, then waking him could be a risk. But leaving him asleep in a dead facility feels like a burial. Her hand rested on the hilt of her virtuous contract, not drawing it, but ready. We'll proceed with caution. If he shows signs of corruption, we'll contain it. The countdown on the screen hit 0. A soft, mechanical hum emitted from the capsule as internal systems shifted from suspension to active mode. Zero's chest plate rose slightly, a simulated breath. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Blue eyes, clear and sharp, focused on the light above, then shifted, landing directly on her. For a moment, there was only the hum of machinery and the soft rush of circulating fluids. 2B didn't move, didn't speak. She simply watched, her expression unreadable behind the blindfold, her posture poised between defense and wary curiosity. "Can you hear me?" she asked, her voice even, careful. The entity known as Zero doesn't reply, as it stares at 2B, his eyes sharp and penetrating, as if he was trying to see her soul. Then eye contact breaks as his eye optics move downwards, raising his hand to look at it. Fingers flexing. Locomotion system operational as gaze raises forward. Date unknown. His eyes moves to land on 2B. You are? 2B observed the way he moved, testing his own joints, assessing his functionality. His voice was flat, toneless, like a system booting after a long shutdown. But his eyes sharp, calculating. Not the wild aggression of a corrupted machine, more like a soldier coming online. YorHa Unit 2B, she replied, her voice cool and measured. This is Pod 042. You've been dormant for a long time. She didn't step closer, but didn't retreat either. Your records indicate you were sealed to contain a viral threat. The facility says the virus has been purged. Can you confirm your operational status? Behind her, Pod 042 hovered slightly forward, its optical sensor fixed on 0. Scanning life signs stable. No active viral corruption detected. Chronological data mismatch. Stasis duration exceeds recorded history. She kept her gaze steady, one hand still resting casually near her sword. The world outside isn't what you remember. Humanity is gone. We're androids, fighting machines. You're not like either. A pause. Do you have a designation? A purpose? YorHa Zero repeats. Never heard of it. He begins to move, pushing himself out of the capsule and stands on his feet, testing gravity, but something catches his attention. His eyes land once more on 2B, neutral. Humans are extinct, his eyes narrows a bit. 2B felt the weight of his stare, the way his eyes narrowed slightly at her words. He moved with a fluid, practiced grace as he stepped from the capsule, no stiffness, no hesitation. A warrior's poise, even after millennia sleep. Confirmed, she answered flatly. Humanity has been extinct for thousands of years. The androids you see now, we were created to fight in their name, to reclaim Earth. She tilted her head, studying him. You don't seem surprised. Pod 042 chimed in softly. Historical data suggests this unit predates the extinction event. Probability of prior knowledge, high. 2B didn't look away from 0. If you're a warrior, you slept through the end of your world, and awakened into mine. Her voice held no pity, only cold fact. Do you recall your last mission? Your allies? 0 looks down, as if he is processing something. No, he replies. Must be hibernation sickness. My memory banks are fragmenting. His eyes raises towards a general direction. 0. That name resonates in my memory banks. A faint, almost imperceptible sigh escaped her lips. Memory fragmentation is common after extended stasis, she stated, her tone clinical but not unkind. Your systems may require time to fully reboot, or the data degradation may be permanent. She watched him carefully, noting how his gaze drifted, searching for something that wasn't there. A name without context, a purpose without memory. It was a hollow feeling she understood too well. 0, she repeated the name, letting it hang in the cool, stale air. It suits you. Her hand finally moved away from her sword, falling to her side. If you have no mission, no memory, you're free. But this world isn't safe. Machine lifeforms roam everywhere. They won't care that you're ancient or lost. Pod 042 floated closer, its scanner sweeping over 0 once more. Proposal: Unit 0 accompanies us to the resistance camp for further diagnostics and integration. Risk of hostile engagement reduced by 34% with escort. 2B gave a slight nod. You can stay with us until you get your bearings. But understand this, her voice hardened slightly. If you show any sign of that maverick virus resurfacing, or if you become a threat to my mission, I will eliminate you. Understood. Maverick virus. Something tells me I will not be affected by it, 0 says calmly. But before he could explain further, his eyes sharpen as he takes a stance, raising his guard. Soon enough, the broken door explodes as machine lifeforms begin to infiltrate the room. Stand back, 0 calls. A thigh guard opens a hatch and a handle comes out. 0 grabs it and ignites a beam saber, getting ready to fight. 2B's instincts snapped into focus the moment the door shattered. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Her body shifted into a combat stance almost before her mind registered the threat. Pod 042 immediately whirred into position beside her, its laser charging with a low hum. Her eyes flicked from the incoming machines to 0. The way he moved fluid, immediate wasn't the reaction of someone disoriented. It was muscle memory. And that weapon a beam saber, not unlike the energy blades used by some advanced YorHa models, yet fundamentally different. Ancient, efficient. Don't tell me what to do, she replied, her voice cold and focused. In one smooth motion, she drew the virtuous contract, the blade gleaming in the dim light. Pod suppressing fire. Cover our flanks. The machines spilled into the room's standard small class units, rusted and aggressive, their spherical heads gnashing with metallic teeth. 2B didn't wait for them to fully flood the space. She lunged forward, her blade a silver arc that cleaved through the first two in a shower of sparks and black fluid. 0 took a step forward, and then he disappeared as a shockwave is left behind. 0 dashes off towards the machine lifeform squadron, moving at speeds even faster than YorHa units could. One by one, each machine unit began to be hacked and slashed. Slicing one machine, he dashes to another. Ha! He cries as he uppercuts another. Then he jumps to land on top of another, stabbing through with the saber before jumping off, making a flip. Then dashes forth to thrust into another, hacking it in two as he pulls the saber off. His body then begins to glow as energy gathers in him. He grabs his saber with both hands and swings it downward, creating an explosion of energy. Ike. He yells as the energy bursts out, slicing several machines. Some remaining machine lifeforms began shooting energy shots at him, but 0 began parrying each with his saber. He shoots his saber at one, impaling it before he dashes to another, punching it hard that sent it flying back. And then he sees himself surrounded as his saber lays a meter away from him. His eyes narrows. He's fast. The observation clicked in 2B's mind with cold, analytical clarity as 0 became a crimson blur. Faster than any YorHa unit she'd seen, faster than her. His movements weren't just quick, they were precise, economical, brutally efficient. Each dash left after images, each strike calculated to destroy. He fought like someone who'd ended thousands of wars before this one even began. She didn't stand still. While he carved through the front ranks, she fluidly dispatched machines flanking them, her blade a whirlwind of precise, lethal cuts. Pod's lasers picked off stragglers with mechanical rhythm, but her eyes kept tracking Zero the way he gathered energy, the raw power of that downward slash that tore through multiple units in one burst. Then he was surrounded, disarmed. The machines closed in. 2B didn't shout. She moved. In 3 swift steps, she closed the distance, her boot connecting with the side of one machine's head with enough force to crumple its chassis. She landed in a crouch beside Zero's saber, snatched it up without breaking stride, and tossed it handle first toward him. At the same time, her own blade swept low, severing the legs of 2 machines that lunged toward his exposed back. Eyes open, she said, her voice steady, but edged with something like irritation or maybe approval. She rose smoothly, falling into guard beside him, back to back as the remaining machines hesitated, reassessing. They learn. They adapt. Don't give them time to. She didn't look at him, her focus forward, but her words were meant for his ears alone. You fight like you've done this before, even without your memories. A beat. Who are you? Zero caught his saber with ease after 2B tosses it at him, and as she lands back to back with him, he hears her question. He did not respond, his eyes scanning the place. His CPU processing at high speeds for any combat advantage. His eyes moves to look at 2B over his shoulder. Do you have any firearms, or is your drone the only one who does long-range attacks? Pod handles ranged, she replied, her voice clipped as she kept her eyes on the shifting machines. But I have access to secondary pod programs if needed. She didn't elaborate, giving him her full arsenal. Details felt premature. Why? You have a plan? The machines were regrouping, their spherical heads tilting in unison, a sign of coordinated attack patterns. They were learning, adapting to Zero's speed. 2B adjusted her grip on the virtuous contract, her weight shifting subtly to her front foot. These units are basic, she added, her tone low and focused. But they fight in swarms. Isolate them, break their coordination. Her head tilted slightly, still not looking directly at him. You're fast. Use that. Draw their attention. I'll cut them down when they focus on you. Zero's eyes narrows as he grips his saber tighter. Copy. He speaks, leaning forth. If he had a firearm, he could adapt his saber to it. But without additional weapons, he's at a disadvantage with the swarm. Then a memory comes to him, a memory of him traveling in the deserted wastelands, fighting swarm after swarm of humanoid machines clad in blue for over a year, non-stop. His eyes looked down. What is that? A memory? A vision? His eyes moves back to lock on the machine life forms. Calculating 20 units left. I'll draw their attention as you suggested. Are you ready? Ready, she answered, her voice flat and focused. She didn't need to glance at him to know he was in motion. The shift in his stance, the gathering tension in the air was signal enough. Her own body coiled, a spring about to release. As Zero burst forward in a streak of crimson, drawing the machine's attention with a series of blinding feints, 2B moved with calculated grace. She didn't chase, she let them come to her. The first machine lunged, metallic teeth gnashing. She sidestepped, her blade slicing upward in a clean arc that severed its head from its body. Black fluid sprayed, but she was already turning, her boot connecting with another unit's chest, sending it stumbling back into 2 others. Pod 042 hovered above, its laser firing precise, sustained bursts that punched through weaker armor plating. Structural analysis. West wall integrity compromised. Collapse imminent if stress increases. 2B's eyes flickered toward the indicated section. Zero, she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Drive them toward the west wall. We'll bury them. Her tone left no room for debate. It was an order, crisp and clear. She began hurting the machines with wide, sweeping strikes, forcing them into a tightening cluster. Her mind, however, lingered on the flash of memory he'd shown. Fighting swarms of blue machines. Was that his past? A previous war? It didn't matter now. What mattered was the present and the 20 units still standing between them and the exit. Zero continues to hack and draw the attention of the machines. Listing the part of the west wall, he takes into action. running towards their direction as the small machines begins to give chase. Once he reaches the wall, he jumps, his armored boots touching it, and then he begins to run up the wall as the machine begins to gather in the position. Zero then stops, holding position on the wall as he slowly slides down. Calculating, he let go and stabs his saber downward. Ha! Smashing the wall, this one breaks and crumbles, crushing the machines. Zero then kicks the remaining wall off as he jump dashes off it, leaving afterimages behind him as he lands between some remaining machines. Zero proceeds to slice them off with his saber, splitting their bodies apart. 2B watched the wall crumble with cold satisfaction. Zero's timing was perfect, brutal, efficient, exactly as she'd intended. The remaining machines, disoriented by the collapse, scrambled over rubble and fallen kin. She didn't give them time to recover. While Zero carved through those clustered near the wreckage, she moved like a shadow through the scattered stragglers. Her blade flashed a precise, downward cut through a machine's core, a spinning kick that sent another crashing into debris. Pod's lasers picked off two attempting to flank Zero from behind. In seconds, the chamber fell still. The last machine sparked and went dark, its spherical head rolling to a stop at her feet. Black oil pooled slowly across the cracked floor. 2B straightened, letting her sword dip slightly. She turned towards Zero, her expression unreadable behind the blindfold, but her posture was alert, assessing. Plain work, she said, her voice even. You fight with impressive efficiency. Not YorHa technique. Something older. Pod 042 drifted closer, scanning the area. All hostiles neutralized. Structural integrity of the chamber compromised by 18%. Advising evacuation. She gave a slight nod, her eyes still fixed on Zero. We should move. More will come. They're drawn to noise, to combat data. A pause. But first answer me. Those movements. That weapon. What war did you come from, Zero? Zero turns off his saber and holsters it on the side thigh hatch holster, disappearing inside his leg. He turns to 2B, his expression neutral. I'm not sure, but that is a topic to touch once we get out of here. His eye's optic scans the perimeter. This place looked familiar, but even his scanners can detect that the combat pushed a troll on this facility. He turns towards the exit and begins to run out. Move, he stated, not waiting if 2B begins to follow or not. She didn't need to be told twice. The moment Zero turned and ran, 2B was already moving, her boots silent against the fractured floor. She kept pace effortlessly, her strides long and fluid, the slit in her skirt flaring with each step. He didn't look back to see if she followed a statement in itself. Either he trusted she would, or he didn't care. Arrogant, she thought, but without malice. It was a soldier's efficiency, not a slight. The facility groaned around them, dust and chunks of concrete raining from the ceiling as the compromised structure began to give way. Pod 042 zipped ahead, scanning for the clearest path. Evacuation route secured. Structural failure accelerating. Zero, she called out, her voice cutting through the rumble of collapsing metal. Left corridors clear. She didn't wait for confirmation. She pivoted into the passage, her blade slicing through a fallen beam blocking the way. She didn't look to see if he followed her lead either. They burst out into the open air just as a section of the roof behind them caved in with a deafening crash. Dust billowed out, shrouding the entrance in debris. 2B came to a stop a few meters away, turning to face the ruins, her chest rising and falling in a steady, controlled rhythm. She brushed a strand of silvery hair from her visor, her gaze shifting to Zero. Next time, she said, her tone dry, a little more warning before bringing the ceiling down would be appreciated. If Zero heard 2B's sassy comment, he did not show it. As he begins to slowly walks forward, his eyes focused on the horizon. As he stands on a small hill, he can see below a world he does not recognize. Ruins, destroyed city blocks. When did he woke up to? And why was he awakened for? Inside his memory core he can read Asimov's laws for robots. Laws that at one time robots were forced to follow. But not the kind he is. Zero raises his hand and looked at his palm. What was him exactly? Memories of being called a reploid comes to mind. But his systems were not the same as reploids, but similar. And what is the use of following the laws of robotics when there is no humans to use it with? I failed. That thought crossed his mind, but he wonders why. 2B watched him from a few paces back, her arms crossed loosely over her chest. He stood there, silhouetted against the ruined skyline, staring at his palm as if it held answers. She'd seen the posture before, the weight of a past you couldn't remember, a purpose you couldn't place. It was the look of someone waking up to a graveyard. She didn't interrupt his silence. Instead, she let her gaze sweep the horizon, the crumbling city blocks, the faint, distant movements of machine patrols. This was her world. His was buried under millennia of dust. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice low but clear. The laws of robotics don't apply here. There are no humans to protect. She paused, letting the truth hang between them heavy, final. You're free of that burden. Whether that's a gift or a curse is up to you. She stepped up beside him, not too close, but within earshot. Her blindfold hid her eyes, but her tone was stripped of its usual edge. My mission is to eliminate the machines, to reclaim this planet in the name of something that no longer exists. She glanced at him sidelong. You don't have a mission, but you have power, and this world isn't kind to those who drift. She turned her head toward the east, where the resistance camp lay hidden among the ruins. I'm returning to base. You can come with me, get your bearings, access whatever records we have. Or you can walk into the waste alone. Her voice hardened just slightly. But if you choose to stay, know this, the machines won't care about your memories. They'll just see another target. For the first time since they came out of the crumbling facility, Zero's eye optics turns to 2B. This resistance base of yours, are they trustworthy? He's cautious, she noted. Not paranoid, calculating. A soldier assessing the terrain, the allies, the risks. She respected that. The resistance operates outside YorHa command, she answered, her tone matter-of-fact. They're general-purpose androids. Less disciplined, less advanced. But they're not hostile, and they don't answer to the machines. She paused, her head tilting slightly. They have their own agenda. Survival, mostly. But they'll share intel, supplies if you earn their trust. She watched his reaction, or lack thereof. I don't trust easily, she added, a note of dry honesty in her voice. But they haven't given me a reason to eliminate them. Yet. Pod 042 floated closer, its scanner sweeping the eastern skyline. Resistance camp designated #13 is 2.7 kilometers northeast. Population 47 androids. No ongoing machine assaults detected. Hostility probability low. Your call, she said finally, turning to face the direction of the camp. But if you're going to wander this world, you'll need intel, and a place to repair. Her eyes tracked a distant flock of flight units circling the ruins. The machines don't offer either. Zero's eyes turns back to the horizon as he processes. I will go with you to this camp. As you said, I need intel, and I need additional weapons. I assume they may have? They have weapons, she confirmed, her voice flat. Nothing like yours. Or mine. Crude projectile rifles, salvaged blades, scavenged tech, mostly. She began walking, her heels clicking softly against broken asphalt. But they'll trade. Or you can salvage your own from down machines. She didn't look back to see if he followed, but her pace was measured, allowing him to keep up without effort. Intel comes first, though. Knowing what you're shooting at matters more than what you shoot with. A faint, almost imperceptible shrug lifted her shoulders. But I'm not your commander. Do what you want. Pod 042 hovered alongside, its optic-trained head. Resistance Camp past 13 maintains a modest armory. Inventory includes ballistic firearms, energy blades of inferior craftsmanship, and assorted explosives of questionable stability. Trade currency, machine cores, salvageable components, or completed missions. 2B's lips twitched, just slightly. Questionable stability, she repeated dryly. Try not to blow yourself up before you've even seen the place. She gestured with a tilt of her head toward a narrow path winding through skeletal buildings. This way. And keep your guard up. The quiet stretches are when they ambush. Zero watches 2B's back as he follows. He does not respond to her banter for the first minute. Then his eyes averts to scan the surroundings. I'll be fine. I don't feel like blowing up any time soon. He doesn't feel like blowing up. The dry delivery almost made her smirk. Almost. Instead, she gave a slight nod, her gaze scanning the rubble-strewn path ahead. Good. Self-preservation is a useful trait here. She led him through the skeletal remains of a city block, her steps careful and deliberate. Broken glass crunched under her boots, and the distant, metallic screeches of machines echoed through the hollowed-out buildings. She moved with the silence of a hunter, her posture relaxed but ready. You fought well back there, she said after a moment, her voice low. Your technique, it's not YorHa. Not machine either. It's older. More refined. She didn't look at him, but her tone held genuine curiosity. Whoever designed you, they built you to last. Pod 042 drifted closer, its scanner sweeping the area. Detecting movement 300 meters northwest. Small class machine life forms. Advising stealth protocol. 2B paused, holding up a hand to signal a halt. Her head tilted, listening. They're patrolling. We can go around or through them. Her eyes flicked to 0. Your call. Fast and loud, or slow and quiet? At my current state, I prefer to avoid combat for the moment. 0 responds as he turns to move towards the inside of a building. These machine life forms, as you call them. They are different to the enemies I felt facing before. His eyes catches a long piece of cloth flapping in a corner by the wind. 0 walks to it, takes it, and then covers his body with it, using it like a cloak. As for my fighting style, my combat protocols reacted on their own. You can say it was instinct. 0 turns to look back at 2B. Muscle memory, if you must. So I assume I did see my share of combat. 2B watched him pull the cloth around his shoulders, the dusty fabric settling over his crimson armor like a shroud. It was a smart move, practical, blending into the ruins' palette. Not that it would fool machine sensors for long, but it might buy them a few seconds. Instinct, she echoed, her voice low. I understand. Sometimes the body remembers what the mind can't. She turned away, gesturing for him to follow as she slipped into the shadowed interior of the collapsed building. Avoiding combat is wise. Conserve energy. The camp isn't far. She moved with silent precision, her own form of study in controlled motion. The mention of muscle memory tugged at something in her own programming, a phantom ache of countless battles fought, countless lives ended. She pushed it aside. The cloak is a good idea, she said without looking back, but don't rely on it. Machines track movement, heat signatures, energy readings. They don't see like we do. She paused at a broken window frame, peering out before slipping through. Your instinct kept you alive in the facility. Trust it. But also trust that here the rules are different. 0 follows up, slipping through the window, then holding himself on the wall before moving behind 2B. He keeps quiet for the moment as they move through the ruins. After moving around, he uses a wall as cover while his back presses to it. This world, even with my vague memories, does not feel like the world I am used to. And those machine life forms, their energy signature is something I do not recognize. It's not pure energy. It's something else. 2B paused, her back against the same crumbling wall, her head tilted slightly as she processed his words. You're not wrong, she said, her voice a low murmur. Their energy signature isn't pure. It's corrupted, evolved. They weren't always like this. She glanced sidelong at him, her blindfolded gaze unreadable. They were tools once. Soldiers for an extinct race. Now there's something else. Something that learns, adapts, even feels in their own twisted way. She shifted, peering around the corner before motioning for him to follow. The resistance studies them, tries to understand. But understanding doesn't always mean survival. Her tone was matter of fact, stripped of sentiment. Your systems might pick up on things ours don't. If you can sense that corruption, use it. It could give you an edge. Pod 042 floated silently beside them, its scanner sweeping the area. Energy anomaly detected 200 meters ahead. Source unidentified. Advising caution. 2B's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. We're close. The camp is just beyond that ridge. Stay low and stay quiet. She didn't wait for a reply, slipping into the shadows of a collapsed overpass, her movements fluid and near silent. Zero's eyes moved to 2B for a moment before going back forth. Was she serious? He has been kept quiet all this time. A ghost of a smirk tries to grow on his lips, but he holds it back to keep his business face. Then follows 2B with cautious. His movements swift, quiet, and calculated, even with the heavy armor he wears. A ghost of a smirk. She caught at the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, there and gone in a heartbeat. He thought her caution was excessive. Or perhaps he found her tone amusing. Either way, she filed the observation away and said nothing. What she did note with clinical appreciation was how he moved. Heavy armor, yet he flowed through the rubble with a predatory grace that belied his weight. Swift, quiet, efficient. He didn't just follow her path, he adapted it, using shadows and angles she hadn't considered. A veteran's instinct. Good, she murmured, the word barely audible. You move like you've done this before. In the dark. Against something you can't see. She paused at the edge of the overpass, her hand rising in a silent halt. Below them, the ruins gave way to a shallow basin where makeshift structures huddled the resistance camp. But between them and the camp's perimeter, the ground rippled with a strange, oily shimmer. The energy an anomaly pod had detected. Don't step there, she warned, her voice dropping. It's a patrol path. Disturb it, and every machine in a half-kilometer will know we're here. Her eyes scanned the road ahead. We go around. It'll take longer, but quieter. She glanced back at him, her head tilted. Unless you have a better idea. Zero begins to consider. His eyes scans the surroundings for a moment. Then stop. Can you climb walls? Yes, she replied flatly. Vertical traversal is within standard operational parameters. Her eyes followed his gaze toward the crumbling facade of a nearby building. But climbing exposes us. Higher altitude means greater visibility for them as well as us. Pod 042 chimed quietly. Scanning structural integrity of adjacent buildings. East-facing wall possesses adequate handholds but shows advanced decay. Probability of collapse under sustained weight, 38%. 2B nodded slightly, her gaze still fixed on Zero. It's risky. But if we're fast and quiet, it could bypass the patrol entirely. She studied his face, searching for any hint of uncertainty. You're thinking of going over rather than around. It's bold. A pause. And if you fall, you'll bring the whole sector down on our heads. She shifted her weight, one hand resting on the rough concrete beside her. Your call. I can make the climb. Can you? Her tone wasn't challenging, just assessing. She'd seen his speed, his precision. But climbing required different muscles, different instincts. If you're confident, we go up. If not, we go around. Either way, we move now. Zero slowly stands straight. Just don't get your pretty little dress tangled on rusted beams. Zero replied. This time he smirks her real as he taunts with tease. And then he moves. Fast, swift, and precise. With silent movements for heavy armor. He reaches the wall and kicks into it, pushing himself upwards. Not climbing like a common way, but jumping into it like a ninja. And in less than 5 seconds, he reaches the top. Then peeks from the edge to watch 2B and assist if she needs any aid. Pretty little dress. The phrase hung in the air for a half second, and 2B felt a flicker of something hot and sharp behind her ribs. Irritation, yes, but threaded with a strange, unwelcome amusement. No one had ever dared. Not like that. Not with that smirk. She watched him ascend, a crimson streak against the gray ruin. Not climbing, vaulting. Each kickoff was precise, powerful, almost disdainful of gravity. He made it look effortless, and that, more than the tease, sparked a competitive edge in her. He's showing off. Fine. She didn't run at the wall. She took 2 calm steps back, then launched herself forward. Her boot met the concrete not with a kick, but with a silent, fluid push, her body twisting in midair. She used the jagged handholds not for grip, but as brief platforms, her movements a seamless blend of acrobatics and momentum. Her skirt flared, the high slit revealing the lean muscle of her thigh, but her focus never wavered. In 3 seconds, she was beside him at the ledge, landing in a soundless crouch. She rose smoothly, brushing invisible dust from her gloves. Her blindfolded gaze turned toward him, her expression utterly placid. Rusted beams are the least of my concerns, she said, her voice dry as the ash in the air. But your vertical clearance is impressive. For a relic. She turned toward the camp below, already scanning for their next move. The descent is less forgiving. Try not to break anything on the way down. Right back at you. Zero simply replied, holding back another smirk as he quickly scurries around the roof of the building. Once he reaches the other side and away from the patrol mark, he jumps off the roof and lands on the wall, latching into it like a madman and sliding down at a walking speed until he gets at a decent distance to jump off and lands on his feet. Then he turns to look up, waiting for 2B. Right back at you. The retort was simple, almost offhand, but it carried a weight of acknowledgement that felt unfamiliar. He wasn't just taunting her, he was matching her pace, her tone. And equal. She watched him descend, not a jump, but a controlled, magnetic slide down the wall, boots meeting the ground with barely a sound. Precise. Efficient. Show off. Fine. She didn't follow his path. Instead, she stepped to the edge of the roof, her eyes calculating the distance, the angles. Then she pushed off, not downward, but outward, a clean, arcing leap that carried her over the worst of the rubble below. Mid-air, she twisted, her body orienting, boots aiming for a clear patch of broken pavement. She landed in a roll that absorbed the impact without a sound, coming up smoothly into a crouch before rising to her full height. She brushed a strand of hair from her visor, her expression cool as she met his gaze. Efficient, she noted, her voice devoid of praise or criticism. But sometimes the direct route is just showing off. She turned toward the camp's outskirts, where the first flickers of android-made firelight were visible through the ruins. We're here. Stay close, and let me do the talking. They're wary of newcomers, especially ones who look like they walked out of a world they've never heard of. She began walking, her stride unhurried but purposeful. And try not to stare. They'll stare enough at you as it is. Risky move. You could have taken some damage. Zero simply said, as he resumed his walk following. Minor damage is acceptable if it preserves operational tempo, she replied, her tone flat and practical. A calculated risk. You would have done the same. She led him through the final stretch of rubble, toward the flickering lights and hushed activity of the camp's perimeter. Makeshift barriers of scrap metal and rusted vehicle frames formed the rough wall, patrolled by androids in patched-together combat gear. Their eyes curious, wary, some openly suspicious, tracked Zero as he approached. Anemone runs this camp, 2B said, her voice low enough that only he would hear. She's pragmatic. Doesn't trust YorHa any more than she has to, but she respects results. Don't mention your origins. They'll assume you're a prototype or a scavenged model. Let them. She paused just outside the main gate, turning her head slightly toward him. Stay close. And don't engage unless they engage first. They're jumpy. Post-traumatic stress is common here. Her expression remained neutral, but her words carried a weight of lived experience. They've lost a lot. Zero's eyes turned toward 2B. What is exactly your role? Sounds like some kind of organization. One who these people seem to be wary of. Should I be concerned? Zero continues following, adjusting his new acquired cloak, using it for weather protection. 2B stopped just short of the gate, her back still to him, but her head tilted slightly in his direction. YorHa is the military command. Elite androids. We fight the machines directly. The resistance, she gestured loosely toward the camp. They're remnants. Survivors. They see us as distant, arrogant, expendable. She turned halfway, her blindfolded gaze resting on him. Should you be concerned? Yes. They'll see you as one of us if you're with me. And if you're not with me, she let the implication hang. They'll see you as a threat. A machine in different armor. Or a rogue unit. Either way, you're an unknown. In war, unknown equals dangerous. She faced forward again, her voice lowering. YorHa has secrets. So does the resistance. Trust is scarce here. Do what you need to survive. But remember, you're walking into a camp full of soldiers who have been fighting longer than you've been awake. They don't need another mystery. A vague memory comes to me, Zero speaks as he stops beside 2B. This YorHa sounds like irregular hunters. 2B's head turned toward him, just enough to catch his profile in her peripheral vision. Irregular hunters. The term meant nothing in her databanks, yet the way he said it clipped. familiar sent a faint chill through her systems. A memory from a war she'd never known. Maybe, she said, her voice low and measured, but comparisons are dangerous here. YorHa hunts machines. If you're a regular hunter hunted something else, keep it to yourself. The past doesn't earn trust here. Only actions do. She resumed walking, her pace steady as they passed through the gate. Resistance androids watched them with guarded eyes, some curious, some hostile, all scarred by a conflict without end. 2B ignored them, her focus forward. Anemone's tent is ahead, she murmured, not looking at him. If you have questions, save them. Observe first. Speak only when spoken to. She paused, then added, quieter, and if you remember more, tell me. Not them. Zero follows, he thinks for a minute. Expendables. I do not like that word. Vague memories of other robot-like people being destroyed, recycled, or retired. Irregular hunters. My memory banks show me a definition. Units that hunt down irregular robots. Machines and androids that get corrupted by a virus, or willingly try to harm humans. They destroy them. 2B stopped walking. Her back went rigid, just for a moment a slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her shoulders beneath the black fabric of her dress. The term irregular hunters hung between them, sharp and familiar in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Units that hunt down irregular robots, corrupted, harmful to humans. Her own classified designation YorHa No.2 Type B flashed cold in her memory. Executioner. Designed to hunt and eliminate androids who learned too much, who became a threat. She didn't turn to face him. Her voice, when it came, was dangerously quiet. Then you understand the weight of that word. Expendable. She let the silence stretch, thick with unspoken parallels. YorHa has similar units, but here in this camp, that history is irrelevant and unwelcome. Finally, she glanced over her shoulder, her blindfolded gaze resting on him. Forget the comparison. The Resistance doesn't need another reminder that some androids are built to destroy others. She turned fully now, her expression unreadable. Your memories are your own, but here they're a liability. Keep them quiet. Understood. Zero replied. I'm not sure, but I think I also was one of them. Irregular hunters. He stops in thought. But as you say, right now it does not matter. She held his gaze for a beat longer, her expression unreadable beneath the blindfold. The admission landed between them, a confession that mirrored her own hidden truth. Irregular hunter. Executioner. Different names, same purpose. The irony wasn't lost on her. Then you know what it means to carry that weight, she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. The silence after. The questions. She turned away, resuming her walk toward the largest tent at the center of the camp. But you're right. It doesn't matter now. Not here. As they approached, a few androids lingering near the entrance stiffened, their hands drifting toward weapons. 2B ignored them, her posture conveying a detached authority. Anemone's inside, she said, stopping before the tent's flap. She'll have questions. Answer them honestly, but sparingly. She's sharp. She'll know if you're lying. Her head tilted slightly toward him. And remember, you're not a YorHa unit. You're a lost prototype. A relic. Nothing more. Zero frowns. Somehow being called a relic is irritating. I feel as if I was pointed that out many times over before. A faint, dry smirk touched her lips. Good. Hold on to that irritation. It means you're still awake. She pushed aside the tent flap, ducking inside without waiting for him. Better a relic than a corpse. And around here, the line between the two is thin. The interior of the tent was dimly lit, cluttered with maps, salvaged machine parts, and the faint, sweet scent of oil and synthetic herbs. Anemone stood over a makeshift table, her back to them, studying a holodisplay flickering with tactical data. She was older than most Resistance models, her chassis worn and patched, but her posture spoke of unbroken authority. 2B, Anemone said without turning, her voice weary but sharp. You bring a guest. One I don't recognize. She finally pivoted, her eyes keen, assessing landed on Zero. They narrowed slightly, taking in the crimson armor, the cloak, the unfamiliar design. And he's not YorHa. No, 2B replied, her tone neutral. He's a prototype. Found dormant in a pre-war facility. His systems are clean. He fights well. She left it at that, her stance casually defensive, one hand resting near her hip where her sword hung. Anemone's gaze lingered on Zero, probing, calculating. A prototype, she repeated, skepticism edging her voice. From which war? My memory banks are still fragmenting. Dead on that aspect will be delayed. Zero responds. His voice calm, neutral but businesslike. Anemone's eyes didn't leave Zero's face. She took a slow step forward, her movements deliberate, like a predator circling prey. Memory fragmentation, she mused, her tone flat. Convenient. 2B shifted her weight slightly, a subtle movement that placed her subtly between Anemone and Zero. Not a threat, but a statement. His combat performance is operational, she stated, her voice cool. He assisted in clearing a machine swarm in the ruins west of here. Efficiently. That doesn't tell me whose side he was on before he took a nap, Anemone countered, finally turning her gaze to 2B. Or what he's capable of now. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. We've had clean units turn before. You know that better than anyone. 2B's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I do. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The weight of her own hidden function type E hung unspoken in the air. But he's not connected to the network. No machine signals. No YorHa frequencies. He's an anomaly. And right now, anomalies are either tools or liabilities. She tilted her head towards Zero. I'm choosing tool. Anemone studied her for a long moment, then let out a low, tired sigh. Fine. He can stay. For now. Her eyes flicked back to Zero. But you work. You fight. You pull your weight. And the moment you give me a reason to doubt you, she let the threat hang unfinished. We clear? She didn't wait for an answer, turning back to her holodisplay. There's a patrol route south that needs clearing. Machines are digging in near the old comms tower. Take him with you. See what he's really made of. She glanced at 2B, her expression grim. And 2B? Don't get attached. Tools break. You know what happens then. Zero's eye sustains, not faltering, not showing any fear, but also not showing submission nor confirmation. Even as he is being stared down by this female-looking android commander. Just point where I need to use my sword, and I will bring you the heads of your enemies, he says. His voice neutral, but devoid of any jest, and it sounded dark and deadly. In exchange, I will require intel and armaments. Anemone's eyes narrowed, a slow, measuring look that held no warmth. Heads won't be necessary. Destroy the cores. That's enough. She didn't thank him, didn't acknowledge the offer. It was a transaction, pure and simple. You'll get your intel and gear once you've proven you're not a liability. Not before. She turned back to the holodisplay, waving a hand dismissively. The comms tower is 3 clicks south. Machine activity's been escalating. They're trying to reactivate the relay. Her finger tapped a point on the map. Stop them, however you see fit. 2B watched the exchange silently, her face impassive. Zero's tone cold, detached, lethally straightforward didn't surprise her. It was the voice of a soldier who'd ended lives without ceremony. What did give her pause was how naturally he assumed the role of a weapon for hire. No allegiance, no questions. Just efficiency. He's used to this, she thought. Being a tool. Being pointed at a target. We move at dawn, 2B said, finally breaking the silence. Rest while you can. The camp has spare bunks in the East Barracks. Don't expect luxury. She turned to leave, then paused, glancing back at Zero. And try not to scare the locals. They've seen enough monsters. As she stepped out of the tent, the eyes of the Resistance androids followed Zero with a mix of fear and fascination. Whispers trailed in their wake, prototype pre-war unknown. 2B ignored them, her stride purposeful. But beneath her calm exterior, a quiet tension coiled. He was an enigma, a relic with a killer's instinct, and she had just vouched for him. She didn't look back to see if he followed. Zero, on the other hand, went out the tent behind 2B, but this time he did not follow her. His scanners detect a weaponsmith, so he switched his destinations towards. He is going to need a long-range weapon. His saber is effective, but is a close-quarter weapon. He is at a disadvantage on distance. Zero arrives before the weaponsmith and begins to scan the varieties on display. The weaponsmith's stall was a chaotic spread of salvaged parts, half-repaired firearms, and blades of varying quality. An older model android with a heavily patched chassis and one optical sensor permanently dimmed looked up from a workbench as Zero approached. His hands never stopped moving, filing down a bent barrel with methodical, practice strokes. "Don't see armor like that round here," the smith said, his voice a staticky grumble. "Pre-collapse? Military?" Zero didn't answer immediately. His optics swept over the displayed weapons, crude ballistic rifles with mismatched components, rewired energy pistols that sparked ominously, a few blade hilts fused with machine core capacitors. All functional, all inefficient. "I require a ranged weapon," Zero stated, his tone flat. "Precision. Reliability. Not the scrap." The smith barked a short, staticky laugh. "Scrap's all we got, stranger. YorHa don't share their shiny toys." He set down the barrel and wiped his hands on a greasy cloth. "You want something that won't blow up in your face, you're looking at the pipe rifle." He gestured to a long-barreled weapon resting against the tent pole. "Single shot. Bolt action. Hits hard, but slow. Ammo's scarce." Zero's gaze lingered on the rifle. His internal systems ran a quick simulation rate of fire, ballistic drop, maintenance requirements. It was primitive, but it was a start. "What's the cost?" Zero asked, his eyes shifting back to the smith. "Cost?" The smith chuckled dryly. "You new here? We trade. Machine cores, intact wiring looms, energy cells." He leaned forward, his single optic focusing intently on Zero's crimson armor. "Or maybe a look at that fancy saber of yours. See how it ticks." Zero's hand moved instinctively to the hilt at his thigh. "Not for trade." "Figured." The smith shrugged and turned back to his workbench. "Then bring me 2 medium-class cores, untampered. That'll get you the rifle and a handful of rounds." He picked up a soldering iron, its tip glowing hot. "And a word of advice, prototype down here, everything's got a price. Even trust." Zero listens to the older unit, his CPU processing on plans. Medium-class cores. He assumes it refers to cores from those machines. Medium-class may refer to units larger than the ones he faced at the facility he woke up from. His eye optics lands on the rifle. Single action bolt. That means the rifle specializes in longer range distances, but not good enough at mid-ranges. Being single action means he will take time to rechamber. Effective for sniping, ineffective for assault distances. But with some modification. No, it would not work either. Even if he adapts his saber into it, its rapid fire is still lower. Still, the rifle is a good option for long assaults, so he will still consider it. Zero's eye optics moves back to the old android. "Your advice is noted. My memory banks points of a saying, when in Rome, do as Romans. So as long as I am here, I will abide by your rules." 2B watched from the shadowed alcove of a nearby supply tent, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable behind the blindfold. She hadn't followed him, not exactly, but she'd noted his divergence from her path and decided to observe. Trust was a currency she couldn't afford to spend blindly, even especially with someone who moved and spoke like a veteran of forgotten wars. She heard the exchange, every word. His cold assessment of the rifle, his flat declaration that his saber wasn't for trade, the old smith's weary pragmatism, and then that phrase, "when in Rome." It was an ancient saying, one that shouldn't exist in his fragmented memory banks. It didn't belong to this era, to this war. It was a relic of a different world, entirely a human world. "Who are you?" The question, never far from her mind, sharpened once more. As Zero turned from the stall, his crimson form struck against the drab camp colors, she stepped out of the shadows, falling into step beside him as if she'd been there all along. "2 medium-class cores," she said, her voice low and even. "The desert to the east. Patrols are lighter there at dusk. Higher chance of isolated targets." She glanced at him sidelong. "It's a start, unless you have a better plan." "I am not familiar with this land," Zero admits. so I only have you as a guide. Zero stops his walks to face 2B. How far is it? Or do we have to wait for tomorrow? 5 kilometers, she replied, her tone clipped. We can make it before full dark if we move now. Dusk favors as machine visual acuity drops in low light and their patrol patterns thin. She turned her head slightly, scanning the camp's perimeter, but the terrain is unstable. Sinkholes, collapsed structures. And the machines there are older models. Heavier armor. Slower, but harder to put down. She looked back at him, her blindfolded gaze steady. We'll need to work in tandem. You draw aggro, I'll target weak points. Or vice versa. A faint, almost imperceptible shrug lifted her shoulders. Your choice. But if we're doing this, we leave in 10. The camp gets restless after nightfall, and I'd rather not explain why I'm heading into the wastes with the prototype after curfew. I will wait you by the main gate. The Zero finishes, then turns to the direction of the gate they came from, letting 2B finish what preparations she needs. 2B watched him go, his crimson-cloaked form moving through the camp with an unsettling, predatory grace. The androids gave him a wide berth, their eyes flicking away when he passed. He doesn't belong here, she thought. He doesn't belong anywhere. She turned and made her way to the isolated corner of the camp she'd claimed as a temporary berth, little more than a cleared space beneath the sagging tarp, her few belongings neatly stowed. Pod 042 hovered nearby, its optic dimmed to a soft glow. Pod, she said quietly, kneeling to check the fastenings on her thigh-high boots. Run a full diagnostic on my combat systems. Prioritize blade integrity and mobility functions. Affirmative. Running diagnostics. All systems optimal. A pause. Query. Is assisting Unit 0 advisable? His combat efficiency is high, but his origin and allegiance remain unknown. 2B's hand stilled for a moment. Noted, she replied, her voice tight. But Anemone approved the mission. And we need those cores. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. Monitor him during the engagement. Log any anomalies in his fighting style, energy signatures, or network activity. Understood. Caution advised. She didn't need Pod's warning. Every instinct told her Zero was dangerous not just in skill, but in what he represented. A shadow from a dead war. A weapon without a wielder. But he was also useful. And in this world, usefulness was currency. With the final adjustment to her blindfold, she strode toward the main gate. In the gathering dusk, she spotted him waiting, a still, crimson sentinel against the fading light. His posture was relaxed but alert, his gaze sweeping the horizon. A soldier, through and through. She stopped a few paces away, her expression impassive. Ready? She asked, her voice cutting through the quiet. The desert isn't kind to hesitation. Turns his body to begin his walk. None of this land seems to forgive hesitation. You do not have to worry about mine. His voice neutral as he starts to walk. For what I remember, I never doubted myself once I proposed to something. 2B fell into step beside him, her stride matching his pace effortlessly. Confidence is a weapon, she said, her voice low and even. But this land breaks weapons, and the ones who wield them. She glanced at him sidelong, her blindfolded gaze unreadable. Never doubting yourself is a luxury, one I can't afford. The desert stretched before them, a vast, ruined expanse of skeletal structures and shifting sands, bathed in the deep oranges and purples of dusk. The air grew colder, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone and decay. Pod 042 hovered silently above them, its scanner sweeping the terrain ahead. Energy signature detected. 800 meters northeast. 2 medium-class machine life forms. Accompanying small-class units, approximately 12. 2B's hand drifted to the hilt of her virtuous contract. There's your course, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the horizon where dark shapes moved against the fading light. They're digging, probably reinforcing the area. She slowed her pace, dropping into a crouch behind a collapsed wall. We'll flank from the west. Use the rubble for cover. You take the small ones, keep them distracted. I'll handle the mediums. She turned her head toward him, her expression grim. And if he started to doubt, she added, her voice barely above a whisper, don't. Hesitation gets you killed here. Fast. The hatch to his thigh holster opens, pushing out the hilt of his saber. He grabs the hilt and holds it without igniting. I have a vague memory that I already faced death a few times and came back. So you can say that I am already used to dying. The last part was a slight joke, as he dashes off with swift movements, using cover to hide. Already used to dying. The words hung in the cold desert air, a joke with sharp, metallic edges. 2B watched him vanish into the rubble, a crimson ghost in the twilight. Her lips tightened imperceptibly. Resurrection wasn't a concept YorHa androids entertained. You fought, you fell, you were replaced. That was the design. But he wasn't YorHa. She pushed the thought aside, her focus narrowing to the tactical display pod painted across her vision. The mediums were ahead, hulking forms with reinforced plating surrounded by smaller, skittering units. Zero was already moving, a blur of controlled aggression. Let's see if you can die as efficiently as you fight. She didn't follow his path. Instead, she scaled a half-collapsed pillar, her movements silent, her body a shadow against the darkening sky. From her vantage point, she had a clear line of sight to the larger machines. Their weak points glowed faintly in her enhanced vision joints, power couplings, sensory clusters. Pod hovered beside her, its weapon systems priming with a low hum. Unit 0 has engaged the small class units. Distraction successful. Good, she murmured. Her fingers tightened around the hilt of her virtuous contract. On my mark. Below, Zero moved like a storm. His beam saber ignited with a sharp crack as a blade of pure energy that carved through the smaller machines with brutal, precise arcs. He didn't waste motion. Every dash, every strike was calculated. He drew their attention, a crimson beacon in the gloom. 2B waited. Let him draw them in. Let them cluster. Then she dropped. Not a fall, a controlled dive, her blade extended downward. She landed on the back of the first medium-class machine, her boots finding purchase on its armored carapace. Before it could react, she drove her sword deep into the gap between its plating and main body, twisting. Black fluid sprayed. The machine shuddered, its systems faltering. She yanked the blade free, leaping to the second machine as the first collapsed. Her skirt flared around her, the high slit revealing the flex of her thighs as she pivoted midair, bringing her sword down in a devastating overhead strike that cleaved through its optical sensor array. Zero, she called out, her voice cutting through the din of combat. The core exposed on its underside. Finish it. She landed in a crouch, already scanning for the next threat. Her breath was even, her mind clear. This was her purpose. This was what she knew. But a part of her, the part that wasn't a soldier, watched him. Watched how he moved, how he killed. Who are you? The question echoed, unanswered, as the desert swallowed the last of the light. Zero dashed at high speeds, reaching the machine. It stabbed through, carving a bigger hole that his armored hand stabs in, grabs the core, and yanks it off with ease, ripping it from the body. But he kicks the metallic body away, just as oil sprays over him, dripping like blood after kill. His blue eye slowly moves to the second machine, then he phases out, repeating the same thing as he rips off the second core, while slicing the metallic body in half. Zero stands in place, holding the two cores, while oil remains drops all around his body, his demeanor looking like a demon holding hearts. The horns on his helmet doesn't diminish that view. 2B watched him stand there, oil dripping from his armored form, the two cores gleaming in his hands like grotesque prizes. The image was unsettling, not just the brutality of it, but the ease. He moved with a disconcerting efficiency that went beyond training. It was instinct, honed by a war she couldn't fathom. She landed softly beside him, her boots making no sound in the sand. Her eyes, hidden behind the blindfold, scanned the area. The smaller machines were scrapped, littering the ground in pieces. The two mediums lay still, their systems dark. Disconcertingly efficient, she remarked, her voice flat. She didn't compliment him. It wasn't praise, it was an observation. A deadly one. Those cores are intact. The smith will be satisfied. She stepped closer, her gaze lingering on the oil staining his crimson armor. It looked too much like blood. You fight like you've done this 1,000 times before, she said, her tone lowering. But not against machines like these. Her head tilted slightly. Who were you hunting, Zero? When you were an irregular hunter. In the distance, the ruined comms tower loomed against the twilight sky. Pod 042 hovered closer, its scanner sweeping the area. Additional machine signatures approaching from the south. Estimated time to engagement 4 minutes. 2B didn't move. Her attention remained fixed on Zero. The story said the machines created two beings in human form, Adam and Eve. They looked almost like us. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual edge. You remind me of them, not in purpose, in design. She finally turned away, gesturing toward the path back to camp. We should move. But answer me this, what are you? A weapon? A relic? She paused her back to him. Or something else entirely? Zero holds the cores in his hand, observing them one more time. I remember. In the past, some called me a hero, but I never called myself a hero. My power is not to protect. That belonged to someone who was dear to me. My power destroys, and I will use it to protect those I believe in, whoever it may be. His gaze looks forth towards the horizon. Then, with no further wait, he begins to walk back to the resistant camp. 2B stood still for a moment, watching him walk away with the course held loosely in his hand. His words hung in the air. My power destroys, and I will use it to protect those I believe in. A sentiment that felt both alien and intimately familiar. YorHa was built to destroy, to erase, to protect a lie. The parallel was uncomfortable. She fell into step beside him, her stride matching his as they moved away from the ruined machines. The oil on his armor caught the last of the fading light, making the crimson seem darker, almost black. A destroyer who protects, she said, her voice low and even. That's a contradiction most soldiers can't afford. She glanced at him, her blindfolded profile giving nothing away. But I understand it, more than I'd like to. Pod 042 drifted closer, its scanner beeping softly. Incoming machine signatures now within 2 minutes. Advising accelerated return to camp perimeter. 2B didn't hurry her pace. Your friend, she continued, referring to his earlier comment. The one whose power was to protect. Are they gone too? Her question was blunt, almost harsh. But in this world, delicacy was a luxury. Everyone I was meant to protect is gone. All that's left is the destruction. The path back to camp stretched before them, littered with debris and shadows. She didn't wait for his answer. Instead, she quickened her steps slightly, the topic closed for now. The smith will want those cores before nightfall. An anemone will want to report. Her tone shifted back to practical, mission-focused. Try not to drip on the barter table. He's fussy about stains. Zero gives off a ghost of a smirk, then sprung into action, hasting his way back. Later on, Zero stands before the old weaponsmith, covered in dried oil, holding the two cores before the old android. No damage seen in him. Your request. The old smith's single optic widened slightly, the glow intensifying as he took the offered cores. They were cleanly extracted, unscathed, no burn marks, no fractures. Perfectly intact. A rarity in the wastes. Well, I'll be damned, the android muttered, turning one over in his greasy hands. You actually got him. And no scratches on you. His gaze lifted, scrutinizing Zero's oil-streaked armor with newfound interest. Either you're real lucky, prototype, or you're a hell of a lot more than you look. He set the cores down on his workbench with a soft clink, and wiped his hands on his stained apron. Payments paid, then. He turned and retrieved the long, crude pipe rifle, holding it out. She ain't pretty, but she'll put a hole through a medium-class plating at 200 yards. Assuming you can aim. He gestured to a small satchel on the counter. Ammo's in there. 10 rounds. Make 'em count. Scavenge more from down machines if you need. Their core casings can be repurposed with the right tools. He paused, his optic narrowing. Tools I have. For a price. His tone shifted, growing quieter, more serious. You handle yourself out there? Seen a lot of units come through, thinking they're hot stuff. Most come back in pieces. He leaned forward slightly. You move like something else. Something old. Something mean. He straightened up, his expression unreadable. Just remember around here, being different gets you noticed. And notice gets you dead. He pushed the rifle and ammo toward Zero. Take it. And clean up. You're scaring the locals. From the shadows of a nearby supply tent, 2B watched the exchange, her arms crossed. She noted the smith's wariness, the way his single optic lingered on Zero's form. He knows, she thought. He knows you're not just a relic. She didn't step forward. Not yet. Let Zero navigate this. Let him learn the currency of this place, not just cores and bullets, but trust and threat. But her hand rested lightly on the hilt of her sword, just in case. Zero looks at the ammunition for a moment. Then he pushes it back to the old android. You can keep the rounds. You need it more than me. I only request you let me use your workbench for a moment. The old smith stared at the push Bekima satchel, then at Zero, his single optic flickering slightly. A slow, staticky chuckle rattled in his chest. Keep the rounds, he says. You think I can't scavenge my own bullets, boy? But he didn't refuse. Instead, he eyed Zero with a mix of suspicion and grudging curiosity. Workbench is yours. For a moment, he stepped back, gesturing to the cluttered table. But you break anything, you replace it. Double. He watched, arms crossed, as Zero approached the bench. The other androids in the vicinity had slowed their movements, casting wary glances toward the crimson-clad stranger now standing amidst their salvaged tools. Zero's hands moved with a precision that seemed out of place in the gritty, grease-stained workshop. He ignored the smith's scattered projects, his focus narrowing on a clear space. He didn't ask for tools. He simply began to work, his fingers deftly manipulating components pulled from his own armor, tiny energy couplers, microconductors, items far more advanced than anything in the camp. The smith's optic widened. Where'd you get those? Zero didn't answer. He was fitting something onto the rifle's crude receiver, his movements swift and sure. It wasn't a modification for the rifle's ammunition. It was an adapter. A port. From the shadows, 2B observed, her posture unchanged but her attention sharp. He's not modifying the rifle, she realized. He's making it compatible with his own systems. After a tense minute, Zero straightened, holding the rifle. It looked unchanged, but now a small, sleek interface port was visible near the trigger guard. It will draw from my power core, he stated, his voice flat. No external ammunition required. He handed it back to the smith. Test it. The smith took the weapon, hefting it. He looked from the adapter to Zero's impassive face, then toward the distant, broken wall used for target practice. He raised the rifle, aimed, and pulled the trigger. Instead of a gunshot, there was a sharp, high-pitched crack of released energy. A bolt of crimson light, not unlike the glow of Zero's saber, streaked across the camp and punched a clean, smoldering hole through a rusted beam 50 yards away. Silence fell over the nearby androids. The smith lowered the rifle slowly, his expression unreadable. Well, he muttered, his voice hushed. That's a new one. He handed the weapon back to Zero, his earlier gruffness gone, replaced by something like wary respect. You just turned a pipe rifle into an energy weapon. Using your power. He shook his head. Who the hell are you, really? Zero took the rifle, his gaze meeting the smith's. Zero did not answer. He also added one more adapter. His holster's hatch opens as the hilt of the saber comes out. Zero's hands picks up the saber and then attaches it to where the round chambers were supposed to be. He takes a few steps and locks onto the target, aiming. Then energy begins to charge from the barrel. The whizzing noise of charged particles begins to be heard like a jet engine powering up. Once the energy was fully charged, he releases the trigger. A large energy bolt shoots off the rifle, striking the target, vaporizing it, and then creating a hole in the wall behind. The energy bolt disappears on the distance. Zero disengages as he glances at the rifle. I am no servo, but at least I somewhat manages to follow the schematics, Zero mumbled to himself as he inspected the rifle for any damage. The barrel was a bit scorched, and the metal felt hot. Maybe he needs to find more heat resistance alloy. He shouldn't fire a full charge consecutively until then. The smith took an unconscious step back. The other androids nearby had frozen entirely, their tools forgotten in their hands, staring at the smoldering hole in the distant wall. The air smelled of ozone and melted metal. Servo. The name meant nothing to 2B, but the way he said it quiet, almost reverent, spoke of memory, not data. A person, A creator, perhaps. Zero examined the scorched barrel, his expression analytical, detached from the shock radiating through the camp. He had turned a salvaged pipe rifle into a directed energy cannon powered by his own core. It was an act of such profound, unsettling capability that it bypassed awe and landed squarely on dread. The old smith found his voice first, a thin, reedy sound. That ain't possible. That's pre-collapse tech. Real. Pre-collapse tech. He wasn't looking at the rifle anymore. He was looking at Zero as if seeing him for the first time not as a curious prototype, but as a force of nature contained in crimson armor. You're not just some old model, are you? From the shadows, 2B finally stepped forward. The watching androids flinched as she moved, her presence a silent command for the tension to break. She stopped a few paces from Zero, her blindfolded gaze sweeping from the damaged wall back to him. An impressive display, she said, her voice cool and level, betraying none of the cold not forming in her systems. And incredibly reckless. She let the statement hang, her head tilting slightly. You just announced to the entire camp that you're carrying technology they can't comprehend. That makes you a target. For scavengers. For command. And for the machines, if they were listening. She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. Who is Serval? She asked, the question sharp as a blade. And what other schematics are in your memory? She didn't wait for an answer. Instead, she turned toward the smith. The cores are delivered. The transaction is complete. Her gaze returned to Zero, final and uncompromising. We're leaving. Now. Anemone will want to report. And you, she added, her tone hardening, have some explaining to do. I did not do much. Zero replies as he holds the rifle by a belt on his back. That shot was not made by me, but it came from my saber, he declares. A little trick I learned from a weaponsmith I knew long ago. His name was Serval. He made me weapons with adapters that I could put my saber in and power them up. A flicker of something crossed 2B's expression, a slight tightening around her mouth, quickly suppressed. It wasn't surprise, it was the cold click of a puzzle piece sliding into a dangerous place. A weaponsmith from his past. Adapters. Power transfer. That wasn't just old tech. That was a systems integration far beyond anything YorHa fielded. Beyond anything the Resistance had ever salvaged. Clever, she said, her voice low. And incredibly traceable. Energy signatures that you need don't just fade into the noise. She turned fully toward him, her posture rigid. You just painted a target on this camp. And on yourself. She glanced at the smith, whose single optic was still wide with a mixture of awe and fear. The demonstration is over, she stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Keep the cores. Consider the rifle borrowed. Without waiting for a reply, she turned on her heel and began walking toward the command tent, expecting Zero to follow. Her stride was brisk, purposeful. Pod 042 hummed softly beside her. Energy discharge registered at 87% above known resistance firearm parameters. Signature is unique and traceable. Probability of detection by machine network elevated. I know, 2B murmured, her voice barely audible. To Zero, walking beside her, she said, that little trick just made you the most interesting thing in 100 kilometers. Anemone will have questions. She shot him a sidelong look, her blindfold hiding her eyes, but not the severity in her tone. And you will answer them, clearly, or I will personally escort you back to that stasis pod and seal it myself. Zero frowns as he follows. Are all women of this era like you and her? Or that's just you and her? This anemone leader. 2B stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The camp's dim firelight cast sharp shadows across her features. No, she said, her voice flat. Not all. A pause, her head tilting slightly. Anemone leads because she has to. Because someone has to hold this place together. She's harsh because the world is harsh. Sentiment gets androids killed. She resumed walking, her pace unbroken. I am a soldier. My parameters are clear. Efficiency, completion, survival. Her tone was matter-of-fact, devoid of self-pity. You'll find others in the Resistance who are softer, who still cling to hope, to art, to things that have no tactical value. She glanced at him, like the operator who tends the flowers in the bunker. She too be trailed off for a fraction of a second, a rare hesitation. She sees a world that isn't just rubble and oil. They reached the command tent. The flaps were drawn, but low voices could be heard from within. 2B didn't enter immediately. She turned to Zero one last time, her voice dropping lower. But out here, in the dirt and the blood, you don't survive on hope. You survive on being harder than what's trying to kill you. Her expression was unreadable. So yes. Here, now most of us are like this. Because we're still here. The dear friend I had was like that. He always thought on the positive side of reploids and humanity. He always believed in justice and fairness. There was one time he doubted himself, but he always came back. Zero pauses a moment. Last I remember, he sacrificed himself to keep an entity sealed. His soul still lingered, but in the end it was absorbed by cyberspace. Sacrificed himself. Soul absorbed by cyberspace. The words hung in the cool desert air, strange and heavy. Concepts that didn't belong to this war-torn world: souls, cyberspace, sacrifice for sealing. 2B listened, her head tilted slightly, processing not just the words but the weight behind them. The memory wasn't just data for him, it was a ghost. She was silent for a long moment, the only sound the distant hum of the camp's generators and the whisper of sand over stone. A friend who believed in something better, she finally said, her voice quieter than before. It wasn't a question. And he's gone. She looked away, her gaze drifting over the ruins silhouetted against the starless night. We don't have souls here, or cyberspace. We have memory files. And when we're gone, we're deleted. Her tone was factual, but a faint bleakness edged it. Your friend, he sounds like a fool. The kind we can't afford to be. But she didn't say it with contempt. There was something else there, a weary recognition. She turned back to him, her blindfolded face unreadable. I had a partner, a scanner. He saw the world like that. Here he is. Hopeful. He asked too many questions. Her voice didn't waver, but it grew distant. He's gone, too. It was the closest thing to an offering she could give. A shared loss, stark and uncompromising. Pod 042 drifted closer, its scanner sweeping the perimeter. Anemone has concluded her briefing. She awaits her debriefing. Unit 2B. 2B gave a slight nod, then looked at Zero. The oil on his armor had dried to a dull sheen. Keep that memory, she said, her voice regaining its usual firmness. But don't let it make you slow. Sentiment is a luxury we bury with the dead. She gestured toward the tent. Come. We have a report to give, and you have a weapon to explain. But as she turned to lead the way, her footsteps were a fraction slower. The desert stretched out around them, vast and empty, holding the ghosts of both their worlds. Zero stops walking. Take that back. His voice speaks dark. If 2B looks back at him, she could see a very fierce expression, dark and sinister. Zero's gaze was piercing at her core like a knife sharpened to molecular level. He was no fool, and I respected him as he could do what I could not. 2B stopped. She didn't turn immediately. The air between them grew heavy, charged with a sudden, sharp tension. She could feel his stare on her back, a physical pressure, hot and pointed. Slowly, she pivoted to face him. Her posture was rigid, her hands loose at her sides, but ready. She met his fierce gaze, her own hidden behind the blindfold, but her head tilted in a way that conveyed sharp attention. You're right, she said, her voice low and stripped of its earlier detachment. It wasn't an apology. It was an acknowledgement. I spoke out of turn. A beat of silence. Your friend believed in something. He fought for it. He died for it. That deserves respect. Her tone hardened. But respect doesn't change the reality. Out here, belief gets you killed. Hope gets you deleted. She took a single step closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I've buried androids who believed in better worlds. I've had to forget their names. Sentiment is a wound that never closes. And I have too many scars already. She held his gaze, unflinching. So I won't call him a fool again. But I won't pretend his way is the way to survive this. She gestured vaguely at the ruined horizon. This is what's left. We fight in the rubble he tried to save. That's the only legacy any of us get. She didn't back down. She didn't soften. She simply stood there, a soldier in a black dress, offering him the brutal truth as her only form of respect. Now, are you done? Or do we stand here all night while the machines close in? Zero's expression grows neutral, his fierce glaze is gone. He begins to walk. His actions save the entire human race. He speaks neutral, more than one time, on his own. Zero stops beside 2B, and that brings to the question. How many humans have your organization saved? He left that linger. As he resumes his walk, gaining distance from 2B on his way to Anemone's tent. 2B went perfectly still. His words hung in the air, sharper than any blade. How many humans have your organization saved? The question wasn't just a challenge. It was a detonation in the silent space where she buried her doubts. The life she fought for, the purpose she died for, laid bare against the legacy of a single, genuine hero. She didn't answer, couldn't answer. The truth was a hollow, screaming thing inside her. None. Not a single one. Her hands, resting at her sides, curled into slow, tight fists. The leather of her gloves creaked softly. The desert wind, suddenly cold, tugged at the hem of her skirt. Pod 042 hovered silently nearby, its optic dimmed as if in deference to the unspoken thing between them. When she finally moved, it was to turn her head away from him towards the vast, empty ruins. Her voice, when it came, was stripped of all emotion, flat and brittle as glass. Our mission is to reclaim the world. In their name. It was the official line. The only line she had left. She didn't wait for his rebuttal. She began walking again, her steps precise and measured, but her spine was rigid, her shoulders set with the tension that hadn't been there before. He had walked ahead, but the distance between them now felt different. It wasn't just physical space, it was the chasm between a soldier of a lie and a warrior who had known a real, saving cause. Transmission from Operator 60, Pod chimed softly in her ear, its tone neutral. Standard status request. No new orders from command. The bunker reports all quiet. All quiet. The words were ash in her mouth. She didn't respond to Pod. She just kept walking, following Zero toward Anemone's tent, the ghost of his friend's sacrifice and the weight of her own empty purpose crushing down on her with every step. The campfire seemed dimmer now, the night darker, and the sound of machines in the distance felt less like a threat and more like a mocking echo. Zero reaches the tent and pushes aside the cloth that beat the entrance, going inside, his expression neutral, but his no-nonsense persona active. He stands by the entrance, waiting if 2B would join in, as she was the one who was going to speak to this anemone. 2B entered the tent a moment later, her movements controlled, her expression a mask of professional detachment, but the rigidity in her shoulders betrayed the tension thrumming beneath the surface. She stopped beside Zero, her stance mirroring his alert, neutral, waiting. Anemone was already watching them, her arms crossed over her worn chassis. Her eyes, sharp and weary, moved from Zero's oil-streaked form to the modified rifle on his back, then to 2B's carefully blank face. The air in the tent felt thick, charged. Report, Anemone said, her voice flat. 2 medium-class machine life forms eliminated, 2B stated, her tone crisp and hollow. Cores retrieved and delivered. Patrol route south of the comms tower is clear for now. No YorHa or additional hostiles detected. Anemone's gaze lingered on Zero. Operational. Effective in combat. 2B's answer was clipped. She offered nothing more. Anemone didn't press. Instead, she focused on Zero. That energy discharge. The entire camp felt it. Saw it. She took a step forward, her eyes narrowing. What are you? Some pre-collapse military experiment? A machine prototype we haven't seen? Zero stood silent, his own gaze steady. The question hung between them, heavy with implication. 2B watched, her hands loose at her sides. She could feel the weight of his earlier question still pressing against her ribs. How many humans have your organization saved? The lie was a cold stone in her throat. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes forward on Anemone, on the mission, on the next moment. It was all she had left. I am just a sword without a wielder, Zero replied, his voice stating a fact and no jest. Anemone's eyes narrowed, her expression hardening. A A sword without a wielder, she repeated, her voice low and wary. That's a poetic way of saying liability. Swords cut both ways. And right now, you're drawing a lot of attention I don't need. Before she could continue, Pod 042 drifted forward, its optic glowing softly. Priority transmission incoming from the bunker. Commander White requests immediate contact with Unit 2B. Anemone's gaze snapped to 2B. Commander White? Now. Her tone sharpened with suspicion. Why? 2B's posture tightened almost imperceptibly. Unknown, she replied, her voice even but edged with tension. I need to take this. Anemone didn't look convinced. Here. Now. I want to hear what's so important. Pod 042 projected a small hull screen in the center of the tent. The image of Commander White flickered to life, impeccable, stern, and radiating authority even through the static. Her blue-green eyes fixed on 2B. Unit 2B, Commander White's voice was crisp, devoid of warmth. Your mission status report is overdue. Furthermore, our sensors detected an unauthorized energy discharge in your vicinity, signature unknown, magnitude unprecedented for resistance technology. Explain. 2B's jaw tightened. The discharge was from modified resistance weaponry, Commander. Testing phase. No threat to the mission. Modified by whom? Commander White's gaze shifted as if looking past 2B toward Zero. Who is that with you? He is not YorHa. Identify him. Zero stood silent, unmoving, but his presence seemed to fill the space. Anemone watched the exchange, her arms crossed, her expression growing darker by the second. A prototype found in the ruins, 2B answered, her voice steady but strained. He assisted in clearing hostiles. His combat capabilities are significant. A prototype, Commander White echoed, skepticism dripping from the word. From which era? Which project? Run a full scan and transmit the data immediately. Commander, he is not connected to any network. Scanning may not yield. Do it, 2B. That is an order. 2B's hands clenched at her sides. She glanced at Zero, her blindfolded face unreadable, then back at the hologram. Understood. She turned towards Zero, her movements stiff. Pod. Initiate full spectrum scan on the unidentified unit. Pod 042 hummed, a beam of light sweeping over Zero from head to toe. Data streamed across the holoscreen, energy readings, structural composition, unknown alloys, power core output levels that spiked off the charts. Commander White's eyes widened slightly. This is not just a prototype, she stated, her voice cold and decisive. This is a pre-collapse combat model, possibly from the first machine war era. His technology is incompatible with our understanding. She paused, her gaze lingering on Zero. Unit 2B, you are to detain him and prepare for immediate extraction. YorHa Command will take custody. Anemone stepped forward, her voice cutting through the transmission. He's under my jurisdiction, Commander. Zero steps in, glaring at Commander White like he did to 2B just a moment before. I advise you to take no such action. Commander White, is it? He pauses a moment. If what you seek is an aid and alliance, I will provide it so. But if what you seek is detainment and experimentation, I am afraid you must back down. His voice was commanding, authoritative. 2B's head snapped towards Zero, a cold shock slicing through her systems. Direct defiance. To Commander White. To YorHa Command. No one did that. No one who wanted to remain functional. The hologram of Commander White went perfectly still, her expression hardening into a mask of icy authority. You are addressing a superior officer of the YorHa forces, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, measured calm. Your cooperation is not a request. It is a directive. Unit 2B, execute the order. 2B stood frozen for a half-second, caught in the crossfire. Her programming screamed to comply. Her instincts, honed by 1,000 battles in a buried well of resentment, warred against it. Detain him? With what? His energy readings were off the charts. A fight here would level the camp. Commander, 2B said, her voice strained but firm. Attempting to detain him by force in a civilian zone would result in catastrophic collateral damage. The resistance camp would be destroyed. The mission here would fail. She was walking a razor's edge, using logic against a direct order. Anemone stepped forward, placing herself squarely between 2B and the hologram. He's under my protection, White. He's done nothing hostile to us. You don't have jurisdiction here. He is an undocumented, massively powerful combat entity of unknown origin. Commander White fired back, her gaze never leaving 2B. He represents a threat to global security. 2B, you will neutralize the threat and secure the asset. That is your final order. The words hung in the air. Neutralize the threat. 2B's hand drifted slowly to the hilt of her virtuous contract. Her movements were deliberate, heavy. She turned to face Zero, her blindfolded gaze meeting his fierce, unwavering one. The air in the tent grew deathly still. Zero, she said, her voice quiet, devoid of its earlier warmth, stripped back to the cold soldier. You will come with me, voluntarily, or I will be forced to compel you. She didn't draw her blade. Not yet. 2B, I will advise you to stand down, Zero states coldly. Any attempt to attack me, I will retaliate. And believe me, I will retire you. 2B's hand tightened on the hilt of her sword, knuckles going pale beneath her gloves. Her breath didn't hitch. Her posture didn't waver. But inside, systems flared with conflict, directive versus survival, loyalty versus cold, hard calculation. I will retire you. He wasn't boasting. She'd seen him move. She'd felt the output of that modified rifle. He was a relic of a war she didn't understand, built with principles she couldn't map. Fighting him here, now, wouldn't end in her victory. It would end in a crater where the camp used to be. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hand away from her sword. She didn't step back. She held her ground, her blindfolded gaze locked on his. Your threat is noted, she said, her voice low, stripped of all inflection. And your assessment is accurate. She turned her head slightly, addressing the flickering hologram of Commander White. Commander. The subject cannot be safely detained without significant collateral damage and high probability of mission failure. He has offered alliance. Continuing hostile action is tactically unwise. Anemone stood stiffly beside her, one hand resting on the pistol at her hip. Her eyes darted between 2B, Zero, and the hologram, her face a mask of tense readiness. Commander White's image was silent for a long, heavy moment, her lips pressed into a thin line. Unit 2B, she said finally, her voice like frozen steel. You are contradicting a direct order. I am assessing mission parameters, 2B replied, her tone flat. Eliminating or detaining an asset of this capability is not feasible with available resources. Alternative approach. Temporary alliance under observation. Intelligence gain, high. Risk managed. It was insubordination wrapped in tactical jargon. A desperate, razor-thin justification. Commander White's eyes narrowed. You are on thin ice, 2B. Very well. A temporary observation. But he is your responsibility. Any hostile action from him, any deviation, and you will be held accountable. And 2B? She leaned slightly forward, her gaze piercing even through the hologram. Do not forget your primary function. The transmission cut out abruptly. The tent plunged into silence, thick and suffocating. Anemone let out a slow, controlled breath. 2B didn't move. She kept her eyes on Zero, her expression unreadable. Congratulations, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You just became my problem. She finally took a single step back, creating a sliver of space between them. And if you ever threaten to retire me again, she added, the words cold and precise, I'll show you what a YorHa executioner is truly built for. 2B. I will be honest with you, Zero speaks coldly. If the androids of this era are like you, not even your entire organization will be able to stop me. 2B didn't flinch. She didn't bristle. She simply stood there, absorbing the weight of his words, a promise of annihilation, delivered with the cold certainty of an executioner's blade. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of Pod 042 and the distant murmur of the camp outside. Slowly, 2B raised her head. Her blindfold hid her eyes, but the set of her jaw was harder than stone. I believe you, she said, her voice so quiet it was almost lost in the tense stillness. I've seen you fight. I've seen what you can do. She took a single step forward, closing the distance he had created. But understand this, YorHa is not just me. We are a network, a system. We are designed to be replaced, to be rebuilt, to hunt in perpetuity. Her lips barely moved. You might destroy us all, but we would drown you in corpses first, and someone someday would put you in the ground. She tilted her head, a small, almost imperceptible motion. But you're right about one thing, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. If all androids were like me, we'd have lost this war long ago. There was no pride in the statement, only a bleak, weary truth. I am not built for hope. I am built for a single, clean purpose. Her hand, which had been hovering near her sword, fell to her side. So here we are. A sword without a wielder, and a weapon whose wielder is a ghost. She turned away from him, facing the tent entrance where the ruined world waited. Command wants you observed. Fine. You'll be observed. But if you make one move against this camp, against the androids here, she glanced back over her shoulder, her profile stark against the dim light. You'll find out what this weapon's purpose really is. She didn't wait for his reply. She pushed through the tent flaps and out into the cold desert night, leaving the heavy silence behind her. Pod 042 floated after her, but she didn't acknowledge it. She just stared at the distant, broken horizon, her breath forming faint clouds in the air. He was a threat. A seismic event in humanoid form. 2B. I single-handedly destroyed a doomsday weapon the size of the moon, aimed to destroy the world, and died in the process. Zero turns around and begins to make way out the tent. I could destroy your entire base and network, and you all won't be able to do anything to stop it. And with that, he goes out the tent. 2B didn't move to stop him. She stood frozen in the center of the tent, his words echoing in her audio processors like a system crash. A doomsday weapon, the size of the moon. It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of history, delivered with the flat finality of a grave marker, and died in the process. Anemone stared after him, then slowly turned her gaze to 2B. The resistance leader's face was pale, her usual hardened composure fractured by sheer, unadulterated dread. 2B, she began, her voice thin. Don't, 2B cut her off, the word sharp as a blade. She was still staring at the tent flap where Zero had vanished. Her internal systems were running threat assessments, damage projections, casualty estimates. All of them ended in one result: total annihilation. Not just of the bunker, of everything. Her hands, held stiffly at her sides, were trembling. Just slightly. A minute vibration only she could feel. He's not lying, she said aloud, her voice hollow. She wasn't talking to Anemone. She was stating a fact to the empty air. He believes it. And given what he just did to that rifle, she finally turned her head, her blindfolded face a mask of grim acceptance. He could do it. Pod 042 drifted closer. Energy output from prior discharge suggests theoretical capacity for orbital-grade weaponization. Probability of statement veracity, 87.3%. Thank you, Pod, 2B murmured, the sarcasm drier than the desert sand. That's comforting. She drew in a slow, controlled breath, forcing her systems to stabilize. The trembling stopped. Her posture straightened, the soldier reasserting itself over the stunned woman beneath. He walked away, she said, more to herself than anyone. He threatened the entire chain of command, and then he just walked away. A faint, bitter twist touched her lips. He could have killed us all. He didn't. She looked at Anemone. The leader's fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a desperate, calculating look. What do we do? Anemone whispered. We observe, 2B repeated, the words tasting like ash. As ordered. She turned and walked to the tent entrance, pausing with her hand on the flap. The night outside was vast and dark. Somewhere in it, a walking apocalypse was moving through her camp. And we pray, she added softly, that he stays a sword without a wielder. She stepped out into the cold air, her black dress a stark silhouette against the campfires. Her eyes scanned the darkness, searching for a glimpse of crimson. He was a threat beyond any skill YorHa had ever calibrated for, and he was her responsibility. End of scene.